Hi, I'm Aruna, a lawyer, and I work as the Associate Director for the Business and Human Rights Division of Human Rights Watch. So, when a brand is transparent, not just about its supply chain, but about different aspects, about its purchasing practices, wage transparency, what level of grievance redress exists in its supply chain, I think it signals two things. Not only does it facilitate grievance redress for workers, but it also signals to stakeholders that it is tracking really astute measures that will tell the brands and stakeholders exactly what kinds of impacts the brand is able to drive in its supply chain. I think the brands that are hesitant to disclose supply chain or factory performance data should think of how they should get ahead of the curve, because the trend is transparency and laws are going to require them, or they're going to have to, in order to demonstrate compliance with these laws, be more transparent. So rather than waiting for the law, they can present themselves as leaders ahead of the curve where the law is actually catching up with their practices. Just to give you an example, I was in one country speaking to labor rights advocates and asking precisely this: how does transparency of the supply chain help them? And they were able to give me a very concrete example. They told me about this case where they were successfully able to intervene on behalf of a pregnant worker who had experienced maternity-based discrimination. What they said to the factory was that they knew which brand was sourcing from the factory, and that they threatened to write to the brand to bring this to the attention, and the factory responded. So this works. The Transparency Pledge is an effort to bring together a group of human rights organizations, labor rights organizations, and global unions to galvanize behind a baseline level of minimum transparency that we believe that is an absolute non-negotiable in the industry today. We cannot move ahead unless we have this baseline level of transparency. And the achievements of the Transparency Pledge Coalition is that it's generated a lot of awareness around transparency, has created a lot of momentum to drive transparency. We have a lot of brands today that are fully aligned with the Transparency Pledge, more that are on track to being aligned. But more importantly, what this has done is that it has, on numerous occasions, we find ourselves receiving inquiries from brands that knock on like partners' doors, writing to us saying they want to align with the Transparency Pledge and be more transparent. So sort of this has created a little movement almost where we're able to engage and ask them to do the Transparency Pledge and much more. I would say that there are three trends: more consumer awareness. Consumers are also saying that they want to be associated with transparent brands. So consumer awareness is really going to drive change. The second thing is legislation. No matter what the level of consumer awareness, we're always going to have the brands without the necessary quality leadership to drive reforms within the brands. For these brands, there is no other choice except legislation. They are not going to voluntarily move. So legislation is sort of going to be a powerful equalizer in some ways, or at least set a level playing field. And we're seeing that with more and more legislation, brands are themselves saying to us that that's why they're becoming more transparent. The third aspect is investors. We are also increasingly seeing conversations around what it means to be an ethical investor, and a lot of the ethical investors want to be associated with transparent brands. So I would say consumers, legislation, investors, those are the three things that really will drive this.